Oh, let's go. How about this? This is something a little bit different, and don't worry, it's still Niners-Chiefs game week, and we're going to get you ready in all of the different ways. But I didn't even know any other way to start this other than to say this is an honor to be sitting where we are right now.
I have goosebumps as a man who worked for that station and worked with this man, not really for that man per se, but a guy who admires broadcasters and admired this broadcaster, and now he's on my show.
Yeah.
Yeah, Stan, you're on my show now, Stan.
That is true. I am on your show. I'm honored. Thanks for coming out here today, you guys.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having us. And just for those of you just joining us, we'll do a quick table setter here. We are live in Pleasanton at the John Madden compound. This whole setup here is something that he created along with his family so that they could do a lot of projects, but namely so that every Sunday they could all get together and watch football. And what a cool thing that it also serves as the backdrop now for the launch of our next guest right here on the River Islands guest line, Stan Bunger, and your new book, Mornings with Madden. And only hours from now, you will be talking to assembled ticket buyers, hopeful readers, and also a cast of other NFL who's who talking about all of this. So congratulations.
Thank you, man. Do you ever have a moment in your life where you're looking down at yourself saying, this isn't real?
Oh, all the time.
Well, that's happening to me right now because, I went into my hometown bookstore this morning in Alameda, and there's my book on the shelf right over there by Malcolm Gladwell's book.
Nice.
It's a pretty good neighborhood. And I'm just so thrilled. But for me, what this is the culmination of a journey that I was just lucky enough to stumble into, to have John Madden, the John Madden, as my on-air radio partner every morning at 8:15 on KCBS for almost 18 years. And then to have had a treasure trove of recordings of those broadcasts, 4,000 or 5,000 of them, to be able to transcribe those, look through them for bits of wisdom, and then try to tell the story of why in the world was John Madden, the guy, who had the Super Bowl ring and the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and as you were describing moments ago, the genius who really set up what it meant to be an analyst on NFL broadcasts, and the video game and the commercials. Why would he show up every day to do Bay Area radio with guys like me?
So what's the answer to that question? Because I was there actually before you were there with Al Hart in the late 90s as a production assistant, and it was a thrill for me to call him and say, John, are you ready? And he was doing it then, and it literally was every single day. So why did he have that connection to that bit? It was either 3 minutes or 10 minutes or somewhere in between, and he did it every day.
I asked him a couple of times, and he would always say, I do it so that my mom knows what I'm up to. That way I don't have to remember to call my mom. And so I'm thinking, well, if his mom passes away, this is over. And then she did, and I thought, well, that's probably going to be it. That was just a line. It gave him a reason to get up in the morning. Members of his family will verify that. John was not an easy riser. It also gave him a way to let loose with whatever was on his mind. Because you got to remember, when 3rd down and 4, and when the play is over in the NFL, he's got 12 seconds to say, this is why the screen pass failed, and you draw on the telestrator. When he goes on the radio with us, he can go on as long as he wants. And sometimes he would push the boundary as we're trying to wrap it up and get back to traffic and weather together on the 8s. Nice. He said, no, wait, Stan, another thing. Do you ever wonder why? And off we'd go.
I wonder if you have any insight on how this even came to be at the outset of it, because we all know if you're in this business, if you tried to pitch to someone today of any name value at all, here's my idea. We want you to come on every day. Click. That's it. This is not even a conversation. You're lucky if you get someone to come on every week, maybe once a month. How do you know how this was, how he was approached, and how that conversation went?
I do, and I'm lucky enough to have had a college buddy of mine, Fred Green, was a production guy at KYA 100 years ago, literally in the early 80s. And Gene Nelson was the morning guy back then. Gene Nelson was, as big as they got in the market. Fred was a recording engineer at KYA when John would come in to record these network features. They were running on syndicated stations. And because Fred's the kind of guy who likes to talk and John's the kind of guy who likes to talk, they'd wind up talking. And so this went on for a while. John, meanwhile, had been on with Gene Nelson a few times as a guest, Coach Madden. one day, they get the idea, Fred does and others, that maybe John would do something more regular with Gene. So they meet in the hallway, John and Gene. They're both limping because John had just broken his ankle stepping off the curb awkwardly. Gene had run a marathon the day before. And they walk up toward each other, and Madden says, "You're limping." And Gene says, yeah, I'm limping. "Why are you limping?" "Well, I ran a marathon." Madden goes, "Well, how long is a marathon?" "Well, it's 26 miles. And he goes, "What kind of a runs 26 miles?" That's how they started. And so what that formed was a bond. And they realized he'll just come on and talk. It didn't have to be about the game the night before, the game coming up on Saturday or Sunday. They just talked. That went on for 12 years. And so that's how it started. To your point, you're exactly right. You couldn't pitch that. You couldn't draw it up. There's no elevator pitch version of that. It was organic. It worked because these were two guys who got each other, who were at the top of their game, and it just went on from there.
So when you take it over from Al Hart, when you got the anchor chair, which was early 2000s, as I recall. And
2000, summer of.
You get the bit, and then Steve Bitker joins you. What was the mix of sports and non-sports, and how did you try to navigate it? Because I know the clock at KCBS, and like you said, you've got business at 25 and traffic at 28, and John didn't really care about the clock. So how did you go about navigating that whole thing?
He kind of got it. And John's son Mike told me a great story. I hadn't heard this till after John passed. On the morning of his first KCBS broadcast, somebody from the newsroom, maybe you, calls him up and says, "Coach, it's KCBS newsroom. We're excited to have you aboard. It's your first day. Now, remember, we're an all-news station. Things go pretty fast here, so you got 5 minutes." At which point, John looks over at Mike Madden and goes, "Watch this." And so poor Al Hart, is like the clock is chasing him and the boss is against the window pointing his finger at him to wrap it up. And, John somehow senses this through the phone line and waits and waits and waits. And just as Al's like, "Okay, John, we got, hey, Al, and another thing."
It's incredible.
And it was just like that.
And I was telling Mark before that Al was not exactly a sports guy.
No.
So, Al and John, the mix of the two was so perfect because, John knew that and wouldn't try to hammer him with, 3rd and 4 like you're talking about. It was more about humanity. And Al Hart was probably 107 pounds soaking wet. And John, is this big football
There's a
guy.
photo that's out there right now on the video wall that's playing in preparation for the event of John holding, standing next to Al. Al is holding a giant piece of pineapple that had been grilled for the event. And you've got Beauty and the Beast, or I don't know what you got, Skinny and the Beast is what you got, and a big piece of pineapple in there.
Stan Bunger is our guest. He is the author of the new book, Mornings with Madden, and we are out in Pleasanton at the Madden compound where we are celebrating the release of this book and celebrating John Madden. And getting ready for this, Stan, Dibs and I have been talking a bunch, and we can't come up with a name that has had like a bigger effect on more aspects of the game of football than John Madden. How do you sort of react to that when you have that thought?
I wrote a full chapter in the book about it, but I think you're absolutely right, Mark. If you want to draw the chart of influence in the NFL over the last 50 years, at the center of it all is John Madden, because he was the soul of the game. He was obviously a great coach. I mean, okay, let's check that part off. He was an incredible reason why people became football fans on television. I've met so many people, I'm sure you guys have too, over the years, who came from other countries or cultures and became American football fans because they learned the game by watching, and John Madden taught them. Now, John wasn't saying, "Now, sit down, kids. Here's how we draw up a trap play." He explained it in a way that was accessible to everyone. Men, women, foreign people, kids, it didn't matter to him. He was an emissary for football. And then he became the conscience of the game. I recall really vividly one morning when I referred to Brett Favre having had a mild concussion. And John stopped me right there and he said, "What are you talking about, a mild concussion? You don't know what kind of concussion he had. He had a brain injury." And John got angry about people talking about little dings or having their bell rung, that kind of stuff. Well, that's all now. We understand that now, but John was way out ahead of that curve. He, after leaving television, became active in what they call the Madden Committee, where rules changes, safety changes. He didn't win all his battles, but he won most of them, and in so doing made the game better. as a business, as an enterprise than it was before he got there. And I think the guy now who I think is carrying that torch is Peyton. Peyton is the new John.
Yeah. Yeah, and he does it with the Manning cast. And
Yeah.
we actually were talking about the most beloved figures in the NFL and outside of John Madden, and Peyton might be the one. And I wonder about you, Stan, and your career. And, you got toward the end in your retirement about the same time that John stopped doing it, and Steve Bitker, your partner who did sports at 15 and 45, a guy who was a big influence for me as a young broadcaster. What was that like for you to have your career kind of mirror the evolution of John toward the end of his career?
Yeah, it's kind of weird because he left the airwaves in the KCBS in 2018, and I hung around until 2021. You got like the last year and a half was COVID, so that's kind of weird. It was kind of empty without him, I'll be really honest with you. And we'd seen it coming. It wound down. He had a health crisis in the 2015, 2016 timeframe. He was away for about a year. And I recall there were conversations with management at the radio station saying, we need to find his replacement. And I'm thinking, that's a bad idea. There is no replacement.
Right.
We'll kind of fill in for him maybe. And, Mariucci did a bunch of hits. Ted Robinson used to join us quite often. I'm missing some names. Cam Inman. But there were a lot of people who helped out. And at one point, I don't know, I'm not going to use the name, but there was a name, a big name, a really big name, who management really wanted. A Bay Area guy with an NFL pedigree. Mm-hmm. And I walked in and proposed that to somebody who knew this person really well. They said, don't bother. He's not going to show up every day. To your point earlier.
Right.
He's not going to show up every day. He'll find a reason, and he's not a bad guy, but he's busy. And to him, he's not going to feel the joy or the need to do a 5-minute hit every single weekday morning.
Wow.
At 8:15. So we didn't reach out to the guy.
Interesting.
Every single day, dude.
Every day.
Yeah.
Stan Bunger, The book is Mornings with Madden. I wonder, and I'm sure you do, any insight on the development, the start of the video game, and then where it went from there? Because there is no way the biggest dreamer in the world could not have thought when it started that this would happen.
Mark, that's true of his entire career, by the way. Every single thing that happened
Right.
to him, just happened. Not because
From the light beer from Miller commercials all the way through the broadcasting.
To be the head coach of the Raiders. I mean, we've got a video clip we'll play of Virginia, pointing out that before he'd only held any job for 2 years. And then Al Davis hires a guy who couldn't hold a job longer than 2 years to be the head coach of the Raiders. The video game, this is one of my favorite John Madden stories because he saw, now computers were brand new at the time, but he saw that this technology could speed up the planning for a week's game. If you could run another team's defense against your offensive sets, or you could do the opposite, you could save time, and find things you wouldn't be able to do if you were just walking around on a practice field. So he has this idea. Somebody connects him with Trip Hawkins, who became the founder of Electronic Arts. And Trip was very eager to meet with John. They met on an Amtrak train riding from Denver back to the Bay Area. They talked. And Trip said, yeah, we could do that. I mean, we'll come up with I guess we could probably do maybe 6-on-6. And John's like, no, it's got to be 11-on-11. It's got to be real football. And Tripp's going, well, I got to be honest. We don't have the computer horsepower to do that. But Moore's Law says in a few years we'll have enough power and enough memory to be able to do that. John said, fine, come back to me when you can. And what John saw that was as a teaching tool. He thought he could teach new people about football. He thought coaches could use it for their game planning. He had no idea. I mean, no idea that it was going to turn into really life imitating art, because now the NFL is full of players who will say right out loud, I learned football from Madden NFL.
Wow.
The blocking and tackling they had to go learn. But strategy, formations, and all of that, they got it from a computer game. John Madden's computer game.
It's just incredible. Thank you again for having us out here.
Yes,
thank
Dan,
you for coming by.
It's great to have you here, Dibs. You
My
too.
brother, yes, sir.
Not just best of luck with the book, best of luck with the event today. This is a great setup, and we're just thrilled to be here. So thank you.
Well, you're very welcome, and I just hope everybody in the Bay Area recognizes how lucky we were to have had that radio thing with John.
Yep.
The book is an homage to that, and also kind of a nya to people outside the Bay Area who didn't have it, but now, now they have a chance to kind of relive it.
Now they can read about it.
So good.
Great stuff. Stan Bunger, the author of Mornings with Madden, which we're